Roses are expensive, and some varieties can be surprisingly difficult to find. So when they do finally arrive at your door, it helps to know exactly what to do to give them the best possible start in your garden. And shipped roses, they can look a little shocking at first. Some arrive as beautiful, full potted plants, while others look like little more than a bundle of sticks and roots tucked into a box. Or sometimes they're just a bunch of bare roots thrown into a bag. So today I want to walk you through what I personally do when new roses arrive here, whether they're bare root roses, larger potted plants, tiny bands, or rooted cuttings, to help them settle in successfully and get off to the strongest possible start. This certainly isn't the only way to handle shipped roses, but after caring for a lot of mail order plants over the years, these are the steps that I have found make the biggest difference. Step 1, unpack and inspect immediately. The very first thing I do is unpack everything right away and simply assess how the plant looks after its journey. By the way, it's raining, so hopefully you don't hear too much road noise from the wet tires on the road. Some stress from shipping is completely normal. The bent stems, yellowing leaves, or even a bit of dehydration, that usually isn't something to panic over. But sometimes a box gets stuck in a warehouse or exposed to extreme temperatures during transit, so I do want to look carefully for any serious damage, like broken canes or mold or signs that the plant is really struggling. If you cannot open a box the moment it arrives at your doorstep, say it's delivered when you're on your way out of the house, for example, at least make sure the box gets put in the shade and then you get to it as soon as possible. It's also important to know the policies of the companies that you order from, because many nurseries require the issues be reported immediately or in a certain amount of time. And in my experience, most companies want you to be happy with your plants, or to at least know if the shipping methods aren't meeting their expected standards. So they want you to communicate with them if there's a problem. The sooner you contact them, the smoother the process usually goes, especially if you need a replacement, since the plants might still be in stock. Otherwise, they might honor their policy, but then you have to wait a whole nother year to get the plant. Step 2, hydration. Shipping is incredibly dehydrating for plants. One of the biggest mistakes people make is planting a dry, stressed plant directly in the garden and hoping it recovers later by just watering it a ton once it's in the ground. But I found roses establish much more successfully when they're fully hydrated first. So before I do anything else, I focus on deep hydration. For bare root roses, it'll be submerging the roots directly in water for several hours, even overnight. And for potted roses or bands, I make sure the entire root ball is fully saturated rather than just lightly watered from the top. If I don't have time to fully deal with a plant in that moment, I make sure to get it in water at the bare minimum, as it can wait there for a couple of days if it has to. But drying out will kill it. Step 3. Prune and clean up the plant. Once the plant is hydrated, it's time for a little cleanup pruning, or maybe a lot, depends on the case. First, trim away any moldy areas, any discolored leaves or broken stems or obviously damaged material. And be sure to disinfect your pruners between plants. If there is a bacterial fungal problem developing, you don't want to spread it or make things worse by using contaminated clippers. If a rose had a rough trip or arrived looking really stressed, I may even cut it back slightly harder so the plant can focus its energy on recovery and forming new growth rather than trying to repair any damaged material. And I do the same thing below the soil line as well for bare root plants. Most of the real water uptake happens through those fine feeder roots anyway, so trimming back some of those thicker structural roots usually isn't harmful. Doing so also makes potting up or planting much easier, because those very thick, long roots, they can get in the way and don't help the plant that much when it's getting established. It's much better to prune them back than to have them break or coil when you're planting them in the ground, especially if you have heavy soil. It looks harsh, but often it encourages fresh new root growth. So don't be afraid to prune. Step 4, give the plant air and a chance to recover. Plants spend days in dark, humid shipping boxes, and sometimes that trapped moisture can encourage mold or fungal problems if leaves stay crowded together. This is one reason plants may be shipped intentionally defoliated with all their leaves removed, or even just before they've leafed out at all. If roses do arrive with foliage intact, I usually place them somewhere with bright light, but indirect, for a little while. Ideally with good airflow and protected from intense afternoon sun immediately after shipping. They need a moment to acclimate before being blasted by direct sunlight or exposed to dramatically shifting temperatures. And while suppliers generally try to time shipping dates appropriately, spring weather can be really unpredictable. I don't want tender new growth going straight from a greenhouse or shipping box or other protected condition into freezing wind or otherwise harsh weather. So if there's still danger of a hard frost or sleet or snow, I'll keep new arrivals protected for a few days rather than immediately exposing them to harsh conditions. Step 5 is going to be to pot them up or plant them out. At this point, I decide whether the rose is ready to go directly into the garden or whether I'd rather grow it on in a pot for a while first. There's absolutely nothing wrong with temporarily potting up a new rose while you decide where it truly belongs or while the weather conditions settle down. I've had some roses in pots for a couple of years waiting. It's better to wait if conditions are less than ideal than to rush things and end up stressing your plant more. And if I'm directly planting into the garden, I want that planting area prepared ahead of time rather than leaving roots exposed while I scramble around digging an appropriate hole and adding compost and fertilizer and all of that. If I'm potting it up, I'll just use a rich homemade compost or a loose, well-draining soil mix. Okay, we're on to step number 6, fertilizer and early care. So speaking of fertilizer, if I'm planting in spring, I'll usually add a small amount of appropriate fertilizer, something gentle and balanced like rose tone or holly tone, always following the package directions because over-fertilizing can cause its own issues. And remember, I am not sponsored, I'm just sharing with you the things that I use and have worked really well for me. In the fall, I generally prefer to wait until spring to fertilize because I don't want to encourage a flush of tender growth right before winter. In that case, I'll just use a good amount of compost to enrich the area around and beneath the plant. And after planting, the biggest thing is simply paying attention for those first couple weeks. New plants dry out surprisingly quickly, especially in containers or windy weather, so it's important to stay on top of watering needs, but without drowning them, of course. It's a balance. Some roses will take off immediately, others quietly settle in underground before you see much top growth at all. A lot of times they definitely follow that whole sleep, creep, leap, year 1, year 2, year 3 paradigm that we all hear when it comes to shrubs and other perennials. Patience is a part of the process. And there's one final thing I like to do at this point that becomes incredibly valuable later on. That's step 7, which is keeping records from the beginning. Ideally, I start keeping records for the new plant right away. It's very easy to think you'll remember which rose is which, where you planted it, how it performed, but after a few seasons and with a growing collection, those details become surprisingly easy to lose track of. So whenever I bring in a new rose, I like to create some kind of record for it from the very beginning, even if it's just a few notes written in a garden journal or in a notebook. I'll usually include things like the variety name, the breeder, the source nursery, planting date, zone hardiness, how big it gets at maturity, bloom color and form, fragrance notes, and then I always make sure to track my own observations about the vigor and reblooming, disease resistance, those types of things, just the overall performance in my particular garden. I also like to note where I have planted this particular rose because labels disappear, gardens evolve and change, and memory becomes a whole lot less reliable over time, or kind of immediately sometimes in my case. I'll probably share more of my own garden record-keeping system in a future video because it's become a very useful part of how I plan and manage the garden long-term. Receiving shipped plants can feel like Christmas, and it can also feel very intimidating the first few times, especially when they arrive looking a little rough. But roses are often far tougher and more resilient than they appear. And hopefully this gives you a clearer idea of what to do when those boxes finally arrive at your door this season. Happy gardening! If you enjoyed this video, there's another one on screen for you here, and I will see you over there.